Today, what I'd like to share with you is a framework for your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I'm often asked about this, especially for organizations that are just starting out and are curious about how do I even begin this work? What do we do? So I've shared in a previous video that I often encourage individuals to spend time in the listening and learning phase so that we're not jumping into action without really understanding the issues, without creating a safe space within our organization to have these conversations, and without having alignment meetings so that we're all on the same page when it comes to this work. That's really, really important. But then when we are ready to jump into action, we move into both an assessment and audit phase. I'll share with you how I differentiate these two. So when I use the term assessment, I'm referring to a survey that goes out to everyone within the organization so that we're assessing their perceptions on the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that have been done thus far. And that might mean 0, and that's okay. I always tell individuals, it's okay if your organization is just starting, it's okay that there's going to be gaps. That's what we're trying to assess, a baseline, so then we can measure our progress. Same thing when it comes to the audit. The audit I refer to as the policies and processes within the organization. So I'm looking at a cross-functional, all the different departments. How are they looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion? And it might be we're not. That might be the answer because we're just starting out in this space. So that might mean looking at your sales, marketing, customer service, procurement, whatever the case might be, and asking, how can we look at this work and approach it from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens? And if right now they are not, then that's your answer. That's your baseline. So there's a lot of different questions of how we can look at the different departments to see what that baseline looks like. So once we have that rich data, and sometimes also for the assessment, when we ask questions, they tend to be, especially if it's a large organization, they tend to be close-ended. So we want to make sure that we're following that up with listening circles to get deeper insights and really understand issues. Because once we have data from both the assessment and the audit, we want to move into a space where now we're creating a plan. But before we create a plan, I usually recommend who's going to be responsible, who are your internal ambassadors of the plan, who is the team of people that are going to be accountable and move this work forward within your organization. So sometimes organizations have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee or an ERG or something similar that can become your internal ambassadors. If not, then this would be a stage of recruiting those individuals. I usually recommend cross-functional because that way you have one person from each department or each function that can become responsible for the plan. And that way, when you're building out the plan, that individual can be the liaison with their department to make sure that everyone is contributing to this plan. And once you have this plan, including making sure that you have deliverables, a timeline, budget attached, who's accountable and responsible for a given tactic, then from there, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee or that team of people that are responsible for the plan can have update meetings. They can determine what the frequency might be. It might be monthly, it might be quarterly, to make sure they're staying on top of this plan. And what you also want to make sure in that maintenance phase is that you have resources available for these individuals. So that might mean continuing their learning, whether it's articles, videos, different resources that they can tap into. Along with, you also want to make sure that the learning needs that were assessed, that you're putting some curriculum in place. So what is the training and development going to look like? And how do you build topic over topic? Again, looking at this from a long-term perspective. So it's not a one and done. We're not doing unconscious bias training and we're out. I call it the hit and run approach versus making sure that there's a plan in place to continuously have conversations and bringing different people together, whether it's in small learning groups, communities of practice or whatnot, so that we can, again, continue to have this these conversations and move the needle. And finally, a reassessment plan. So how do we reassess every single year at the same time to make sure that we understand what's working, what's not working, and what are we going to do differently? So doing a stop, start, continue, for example, is one way to see what are we going to change as we move forward. So that is a very simple and quick way of sharing a framework with you that you can do yourself within your organization. And if you feel that you need help or support, please feel free to reach out.